Welcome everyone, this is On Just Restart, and this time we're going to be talking about that eventual September Nintendo Direct. That's right, I think, and probably quite a few of you as well also think that a September General Nintendo Direct is coming. And yes, this is still July, but the speculation and leaks and rumors are already starting to circulate again, and I'm going to go ahead and put out my own speculation as to why I think we're going to be getting a big Direct in September and what sorts of announcements we should sort of maybe expect around that time. So that's what we're talking about today. Now, before we jump into things, let me very quickly talk about my social media. You may see a few different things here on the screen. You can check that all out. It is linked in the description below. And of course, if you like what you're seeing here, you can subscribe. So to get things started, let's first talk about why I think there's going to be a Nintendo Direct in September. And it really just comes down to the timing of things. So firstly, if we look at 2017, there was a September Nintendo Direct. If we look at 2018, there was a September Nintendo Direct. If we look at 2019, there was a September Nintendo Direct. Now, in 2020, there was just a Direct Mini Partner Showcase, but 2020 was the whole big pandemic year. 2021 is shown to be more of a return to norm for Nintendo. We had a standard full-scale February General Direct, and then we also had a full-scale standard E3 Nintendo Direct. Everything is sort of following the typical pattern we've seen in previous years during the Switch era, so it makes sense to maybe think that they will also have something similar around that time as well. And it's not just because the historical precedent is there of there being directs around that time, but it also kind of makes sense for a few other reasons. One is because eventually Nintendo does have to make a few more announcements in terms of what we should sort of expect leading up until the end of their fiscal year, which ends March 2022. We know about Pokemon Legends Arceus in January, but we don't really know what we're getting in February or March, so Nintendo may finally detail what that will be. On top of that, by that point, it will be about time to get the next Smash update, which will be the final Smash update, so yes, that could very likely be announced during the September Nintendo Direct. But then going beyond that, Nintendo will also likely want to detail some of their games that are coming out throughout the year. The next big Wario game is coming out this September. Now, it's coming out September 10th. I'm not saying that the Nintendo Direct will happen before September 10th, but there is a possibility they may want to put the Direct before then, just so they can talk about WarioWare. Or maybe more likely, the Direct will happen a little bit later into the month, and they will give us another update on WarioWare during this Direct, maybe some DLC updates and things of that nature. But before that, leading up to September 10th, there will just be a lot of like trailers and things like that hyping up and advertising WarioWare. But then going into October, we are getting Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread is something Nintendo has been hard pushing and marketing a lot lately, so they're probably going to give us one more big update in a Direct, and September would be the ideal time because Metroid Dread comes out October 8th. Conceivably, maybe this Direct happens like early October, right before the release of Metroid Dread, but I'm going to go ahead and stick with the pattern here and say that we actually got this Direct in September. And then going beyond that, we need updates for the next Mario Party game, which comes in late October, and then in November, we're getting Shin Megami Tensei 5. Nintendo's going to want to talk about that more in a Direct as well. And the thing with Shin Megami Tensei 5, it's like a big third-party game that Nintendo's really pushing here, and it's the kind of thing that, yeah, they can sort of market through social media and such, but they may want to give it a nice big showcase, another one during a Nintendo Direct to really show it off to the fan base here so they can become more inclined to buy this game that they may not be used to, since most of the Nintendo fan base are Nintendo fans, and not all Nintendo fans are Shin Megami Tensei fans, so SMT5 may need another big feature in a September Direct. I think it makes sense. But then going beyond that, we have Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and then of course Legends Arceus comes out in January. We need updates on those games. There's a chance that we see a mention of them during the September Direct. What's weird though is that we never got any sort of Pokemon updates at E3. And the speculation right now is that it has all to do pretty much with Pokemon Unite, which just released. It's a big game that has a lot of sort of expectation there in terms of sales potential and such. So that's sort of what Pokemon Company is focusing on right now. So perhaps once the hype with Pokemon Unite sort of dies down a little bit, then they will start talking about Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl and Legends Arceus. They probably just want to get as many Pokemon fans into Unite first, and then maybe a few weeks from now we finally get some Pokemon news. And once they start actually showing news for these games, we'll be getting continual updates, and there may be some of those continual updates in an actual September Direct. And I haven't mentioned it yet, but also likely we should get some more information on Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp. It's coming out this December. It also deserves some more attention, so us seeing that during a September Direct makes tons of sense. But these are all games we already know about. We're going to get updates on them. What are things that we may not necessarily be expecting, or at least we don't know are necessarily happening? Well, one thing is Monster Hunter Rise getting paid DLC. While maybe many of you expect it in terms of the timing, when is that going to happen? It happening around the September Direct might make sense. That is around the time of the Tokyo Game Show, where we usually do get Monster Hunter news, and it will have been about half a year since the release of Monster Hunter Rise, which might be the right time to announce their big paid DLC project. I'm not saying it's coming out in September, but maybe they announce it in September. It's coming out sometime in 2022. I think that makes a lot of sense, and it could be a really cool hype reveal. If it's anything like Iceborne for World, it's gonna be a very exciting DLC pack. There are a few more games that we already know about that maybe they could also talk about during this Direct. One of them is Breath of the Wild 2. It has that 2022 release date, so maybe they talk a little bit more about Breath of the Wild 2 during this Direct. If Breath of the Wild 2 is coming out to close out the fiscal year for March 2022, then for sure they're going to talk about Breath of the Wild 2 during the September Nintendo Direct, in my opinion. But I do not actually expect Breath of the Wild 2 to be coming out that early at this point. I think it's more likely a holiday release, and I'm basing that simply off of how they sort of showed the information to us in the Direct. They sort of said we're aiming for a 2022 release date, which suggests that it's not going to be an early release timing, and they didn't really give us that much information on Breath of the Wild 2 at E3. Some may argue that it has a lot more to do with Skyward Sword HD. Maybe Nintendo wanted to give that a little bit of a focus, and by the September Direct, Skyward Sword HD sales and hype will have probably gone down a little bit, so at that point maybe Nintendo may feel more comfortable with marketing and hyping up Breath of the Wild 2, but I'm thinking we may wait a little bit more before we start getting even more information on the next big Zelda game. So then that begs the question, will there be any other sort of Zelda announcements during the September Direct? Potentially nothing. We may not see anything Zelda at all mentioned during the Direct, but there's a possibility they could announce something. We have heard for a while that Twilight Princess HD and Wind Waker HD are just waiting to be released. Maybe Nintendo may want to announce them during the September Direct, and they'll be coming out maybe in February of next year to sort of tide Zelda fans over until Breath of the Wild 2 is ready to come out later into 2022. That's possible. They could maybe do that, but it's also possible we don't see those games for another year or two from now when Nintendo needs a gap to actually be filled in. We don't necessarily need those Zelda games in February. But on the note of Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD, there is also the rumored Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask HD, so maybe those games come out at some point as well. That is also a possibility. But on the note of Zelda games getting announced, it does make me think, well, what if we get some sort of virtual console legacy content announced? That is also a possibility. Something I didn't mention earlier, another reason to maybe expect the Direct in September, is that usually around that time, that's when a lot of Switch owners need to renew their online membership, and that's usually around the time Nintendo offers some sort of new type of content to retain those Switch online members. So maybe we get some sort of announcement then, maybe we get more games for Nintendo Online, maybe they add N64, or maybe they add Game Boy or Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance to get like some of those Metroid games on there to hype up Metroid Dread. Those are all possibilities, and with that in mind, we could also maybe see some legacy Zelda games added to the Switch eShop. If they do N64 or Super Nintendo, there's a few different options depending on which sort of platform they choose. But also kind of continuing on that sort of train of thought here, there has been the speculation that Nintendo might be partnering with Microsoft in terms of something related to Game Pass. And if that's the case, maybe we see some sort of special hybrid Game Pass sort of service announced around this time, and maybe that's sort of included with some sort of premium Nintendo Online membership. Maybe that could be happening, but that is kind of like some pipe dream speculation here. But there have been some signs suggesting that there is something big happening between Nintendo and Microsoft, And through process of elimination, Game Pass kind of makes a lot of sense. But if it's not Game Pass, what could it be? Is it a rare replay? Is it a Master Chief Collection? Is it something else? Those are possibilities, and rumor has it around this time is when we'll see the announcement of what Nintendo and Microsoft are sort of cooking up. So that's going to be something else we could sort of be looking forward to around this September time. But going back to the big game that could be coming out this upcoming March, I think it's probably Splatoon 3. Why Splatoon 3? Well, one, because I don't think it's Breath of the Wild 2, and Splatoon 3 has that kind of sales potential that would certainly be befitting of that March period, similar to Monster Hunter, similar to Animal Crossing. It's the kind of game that could go beyond 10 million copies sold, so I think that would do really, really well, similar to Zelda, but because I think Zelda's going to take longer, Splatoon 3, I think, could be the game. Not to mention that we got an update on the game early in February where they announced it was coming out in 2022, which seemed like a really early time to announce it, but that could be because this isn't intended to be a late 2022 game or a mid-2022 game. Maybe it is an early 2022 release. There's got to be something big around that time, maybe, right? So maybe it's Splatoon 3. If it is, we are going to be getting updates on Splatoon 3 during this Direct. And maybe Splatoon 3 does take a little bit longer. If so, then, you know, it could come out summer or so, and that will be fine. But even if it's coming out in summer, we could still get updates on Splatoon 3 during this time. Maybe we get something else around that February-March period, and it's nothing that we've mentioned so far. That's definitely a possibility, which sort of brings me to the final sort of segment for this video. All of the unannounced games that could potentially be announced during this Direct. Usually, in a September Direct, we get one or two big announcements of games that are coming out in the next year. We've gotten announcements like Luigi's Mansion before, so what if we get something big like that and it's coming out next year? One potential announcement that comes to mind is the now long-rumored Donkey Kong game. I definitely think this is a real thing, it's just a matter of when it's going to get announced, and potentially could be announced in September. It could be one of those big, exciting new games that's coming out in 2022 that Nintendo may want to put in that September Direct to really surprise fans and get them excited for the next year. It could be that, but if it's not that, that doesn't mean it's not coming out next year. It's just not the game Nintendo decided to show off at this point. There are a few others though. Another option could be the long-rumored Fire Emblem remake, and even if you don't believe the rumors, it's about time to get the next Fire Emblem game. The last one came out in 2019, and we usually see a few per generation, and they usually do some remakes as well, so I think we are overdue for a remake. So to get a Fire Emblem remake announced in a September Direct so it can come out sometime next year, that's certainly a possibility, and it may not even be coming out like next year, it may come out by summer. I think that's possible, so there's a pretty good chance, I think, that it could be announced during the September Direct. But continuing on, another series we could get an announcement for, maybe a couple announcements for, is Kirby. I think there is going to be like some sort of online eShop Kirby game announced. Maybe that is tied into some of the big Nintendo Online updates we see later this year. But then going beyond a smaller Kirby announcement, I also think we could be seeing the announcement of a bigger sort of mainline Kirby project that HAL has been sort of teasing for a little while already with a few different interviews. They say they want to do something big for the franchise, so maybe we finally get a really big Kirby game that is even larger in scope than Star Allies. Maybe it has another sort of perspective here. Maybe it's a 3D Kirby game. Maybe it's a 4D Kirby game. That's a joke, but maybe. What if there is time travel? That'd be an interesting little gimmick, right? But the point is that we could see some major Kirby announcements as well. It is about time. We usually have multiple sort of Kirby announcements every year or so, so I think we're also overdue for another Kirby announcement. But then going beyond that, I think we're also a little overdue for a Monosoft project as well, or at least an announcement for one. They've been working on a big new IP project since 2017, at least that's when they put out hirings for this project. We are now entering 2022. They don't have to announce it yet, but there's a good chance it comes out in 2022, so they could announce it during the September Direct. Or maybe they could finally announce Xenoblade Chronicles 3, if that's around the corner. That's also a possibility. Monosoft has multiple studios, they are very big, they are working on multiple games here, so it's another one of those strong considerations for an announcement during a big Nintendo Direct. Going beyond that, we still haven't seen what the big Mario Kart ARMS team is working on, so that is also another game that could be announced during this Direct? I'm thinking no, just because whatever they're working on, I feel like that would be something that could be really huge, shown off at E3, or be like a really cool, exciting early year announcement, similar to how Splatoon 3 was announced earlier this year. So I'm not expecting that one to get announced during the Direct, but similar to the other games I just talked about, or potential game announcements I just talked about, it is kind of a toss-up. Nintendo could choose any of these to mention during the Direct to really hype us up, because they all have good chances to come out next year. And actually, another series that could potentially get an update next year and get maybe talked about during the September Direct is Bayonetta 3. So that's a possibility, although I feel like that's the kind of game that would have been talked about at E3. So since we didn't get an update then, they could show it off during the September Direct, but it's also possible that maybe they hold that off for a Game Awards trailer, or maybe they simply wait even longer, maybe not until E3 of next year. It really kind of depends how far along they are with this game. It's supposed to be a big, ambitious project, and when it was announced, maybe it wasn't really that far along. And considering COVID and all of these things could sort of explain why it's taken so long for us to get more news on the project. But again, like everything else I've mentioned during this segment, it is another one of those big games that Nintendo has sort of in the works that could be coming out at some point or another, and an announcement is certainly on the horizon. I'm sure there are some projects I am missing or forgetting. Pikmin 4, for example. Maybe that finally gets announced. Maybe. I do think eventually it will happen. There is that Pikmin mobile game, so maybe Nintendo is building up to something here. So just another one of the various possibilities I've brought up. Given that it's just July, I'm not prepared to make any sort of big predictions, but if I'm going to put any out there, I'll say, 1, I predict that there will be a September Direct, and I also predict that we will learn about what big game is coming out around February or March to close the fiscal year. I think it's likely Splatoon 3, but as I mentioned in this video, there are a few other options, and on the note of those options, maybe Donkey Kong, maybe Kirby, those could maybe be there, but even if they're not going to be coming out in March, if they're going to be coming out sometime in 2022, Nintendo will likely surprise us with a few of those games in the September Direct to simply get us sort of excited and more hyped for next year. So that's a possibility. Actually, another game that I didn't even mention throughout the course of this entire video is Mario Rabbids Sparks of Hope. That's another game we could potentially get an update on during this Direct. Point is, there's tons of options, and it's going to be exciting because with all the games we just know about, not even any of the new stuff, just getting updates on these games is going to be exciting enough, I think, but there probably still will be a few new game announcements as well. But that's what I'm sort of thinking right now in terms of the September Nintendo Direct for 2021. What do you guys think? Do you guys think it's happening? What do you think will be there? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.